Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Socket podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my friend Claudia Gallo of the Beermann Family Law Firm. Claudia is an attorney, and we are going to talk about divorce. Isn't that a fun topic? Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, so I went through a divorce 13 years ago. My ex-husband and I are happily divorced. We have forged a really nice relationship 13 years later. It took us a little bit, but we've gotten there. But today we're going to talk about if you're in the beginning phases of, oh, I think I might be getting divorced, or I know I want to get divorced, or I think my spouse might be filing. What do you need to do to get your ducks in a row? And what is this process going to look like in the beginning? So Claudia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Cathy. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. And like you said, divorce can sometimes be a bit scary when you're beginning that process. And what I hope to do today is to make it less overwhelming and to give you a sense of calm and confidence as you enter into this phase of what you might be starting in your life. So if you're thinking whether you might want to get divorced or you're having some thoughts that maybe your spouse is considering divorce, preparation is key, as it is for many other things in life. So I would first suggest one of your first things to do is get a handle on your finances. And if you're the spouse in the relationship that doesn't handle the finances, it's never too late to learn. So just become more involved. Look at your bank account statements. Most of us don't even get the mail anymore. We get online statements. So go online, chase.com, whatever your bank is. Start becoming familiar with how your financial household runs and how much money it takes to support your lifestyle. It might sound overwhelming to some or maybe too basic to others, but you have to start somewhere. And to start with, I really encourage you to understand at a base level what it costs to run your life.
Yeah. Well, and I think people are going to fall into one of three categories. Someone who takes care of all of the family's finances and really has a great handle on that, all the way to the opposite side where I've had a couple of friends of mine that have gotten divorced and they're like, I didn't even know where we banked. I didn't know where our investments were. We had $75,000 of credit card debt and I had no idea. I don't have logins. I don't know where even to look for it. And then you're going to have someone, I kind of know some of it, but I probably know where we bank and I can figure out where our financial planner is. And I think we have some credit card debt, but they don't know all of it. And so that also financial issues can be a large part of why people are getting divorced, correct?
Exactly. And it runs the gamut, Cathy, just like you said. So one of the things too, if you find yourself in a category of, I don't know where we bank, call a lawyer because as you said, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So reach out, call me at Beermann, Law Firm. A consultation is going to give you so much information and just put you in the driver's seat as to what you can expect and what the process will be like and what your life might look like during the process and more importantly, after the process. Yeah. So if you're in that category of, I don't know where to start, I don't have the login information, working with a lawyer can be very helpful in that regard. We will have once, and if you decide to file the petition for divorce, you'll have a court case. And so you have access to documents, we call it discovery. And all of this information is going to come in and you might be overwhelmed by that too. But that's more for the lawyers and the paralegals to deal with. But you will have this information. It will be available to you, especially if you're in a situation where your spouse, whether it's he doesn't give or he or she doesn't give me this information, I can't access it for whatever the reason, it's going to become available to you. And we will be able to then inform you of what the circumstances and what your financial world looks like. But that first step, and it really can be overwhelming, I think, to call a lawyer, especially a divorce lawyer. No one wants to call us, but that's where you start learning and it will ease your mind. I mean, it might sound counterintuitive that calling a divorce lawyer is going to ease your mind, but it will give you a sense of knowing what comes next, what to expect. And it's not as scary and intimidating anymore. So while you might talk to some friends about what you're going through, I would encourage you, your friends are great for emotional support, but not necessarily legal support, unless of course they might be a divorce lawyer. But but
like, hey, come over for some wine. I have a couple questions.
But that's where you have to, maybe take that first step is really the hardest in making that first phone call, and realize too that just because you call a divorce lawyer doesn't mean you're going to get divorced.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Because I'm sure some people feel like, oh, I'm not ready to take that step. I'm not ready to file. I'm not ready to, but you can figure out what you need to know before you file. Now, in my case, I filed too early. And I didn't understand that there were status hearings every month. It's a requirement of the process. And I had no idea. So we filed, and then a couple months went by, and like the retainer was almost gone. I'm like, I don't understand. I didn't even talk to anyone. And so I didn't understand that part of the process. Now that was 13 years ago. Is that still part of the process?
So yes, once you put a case on file, the court and the judge has a job to do as well. Okay. Their job is to get your case off their docket. So they have these 30, usually they're every 30 days. Sometimes they can be 45 or 60 days out. But the purpose of that is for the judge to keep your case on track, which is beneficial. There's a positive to that for you because you want your case to stay on track and get to the end line. But the negative to you, as you point out, Cathy, is that there's a cost associated with going to court. I will say in the Zoom world, that cost has been reduced because we don't have to
driving.
We travel to court, and we all have mostly, not in every single Zoom courtroom, but in DuPage especially, they give you an exact time. So you're not waiting anymore for the judge. So you have your time, and it's usually a much quicker court proceeding, and it does save clients money. So there's a benefit there. But the other benefit, once you make that phone call and once you're ready to start a divorce process, there's things you can do. And one of those things, Cathy, like you said, it was too early because maybe you hadn't thought through different parts of the process, whether it was on the financial end or the parenting side of things. But the parties, the husband and the wife, or partners, can decide, maybe we want to do mediation. And mediation gives you a lot more control over the process. And I highly recommend that. I recommend it more with what we call attorney-assisted mediation, because that just drives your case forward faster. And it arms you both with the knowledge of what the legal and what the laws are. So it's one thing to go through mediation, but if you don't know what the law would provide to you or what would happen in the courtroom, you don't really have anything to judge it against. And you might feel upset. Oh, that doesn't seem fair. Or why is he or she getting more than me? And all those different questions. So the attorney-assisted mediation process helps you weigh and balance what might be proposed to you in mediation. And we can say, well, if you were in court, this is what could happen.
Sure.
So it gives you that ability to plan and make decisions that might not be available to you in the courtroom, because the judge has to follow, or we hope that they follow, the law. So there's only so many options they have at their disposal.
Sure. Well, and I think at this point, there are pretty standardized formulas, correct? Like
there are,
and I'm sure there's some give and take of this. It's a no fault state. So it's not, oh, well, he did me wrong, or she did me wrong, or did this or did that. That's not really going to play into it, correct?
You raised so many questions, Cathy. So there are formulas. There's statutory, guideline, maintenance, and child support. And for the guideline maintenance, the court looks at families where the joint combined income is $500,000 or less. Okay. However, even if you find yourself outside of that threshold, above it, the courts are still, it's kind of an easy thing for them to do. There's a formula, let's plug in numbers. So even if you fall outside of that threshold, and you make more than the $500,000 per year, the courts are still going to plug in the numbers to see how it looks.
Okay.
And it's not uncommon for that to be the barometer that's used. Of course, as you get into much higher end incomes, it may not work as well, but that's where the
That was
discretion
not my case in my divorce hearing. That
But
was definitely not my case.
it does take a lot of the guesswork out when you fall at 500 or below. You kind of know, absent extraordinary circumstances or special circumstances that might be unique to your case, what support's going to look like. And child support has a formula as well. It's not as straightforward as the maintenance formula, because in Illinois, we've adopted in July of 2017 what we call the income shares formula. So it's a more complicated formula that thankfully we have a software program that spits out numbers for us, but it's based upon each of the parties' respective income. And if one party doesn't work, depending upon situations, the court and or the attorneys, if we're working in mediation, will impute a certain level, possibly not for everybody, but a lot of times we will impute some reasonable amount of income for the spouse that's not traditionally employed. But it's also, the other component is how many overnights each parent has with the children. Mm-hmm. So that becomes, unfortunately, another area for parties to argue about. How many overnights will we each have? If you're the payor spouse, the one who's making more money, if you have 146 overnights, you're going to get a little break on your child support. So unfortunately, there is some arguments that occur if someone is really more concerned about trying to reduce their support obligation on one hand versus what might work better for the family on the parenting time schedule.
Yeah.
But we could talk about that for a whole other podcast.
I'm
but,
sure.
But it's something to think about. And if
sure.
One other thing to think about, if you find yourself, and there's so many things to think about, but one thing to think about is the parenting time schedule. You know, what works best? What do you think will work best for your family? And you have to keep an open mind. So it can't just be looking at it through a lens where you're only considering yourself, but you have to think about your kids' schedules and their emotional needs. Are they, do they take change well? Or do they adapt easily? Your partner's job, do they travel a lot? Do they commute downtown? What does it look like? What's going to work for parenting time schedule, logistics, transportation, and just how many days a week you each have? So you should really start, and it might seem maybe too elementary to some, but what's going to work best for you and your kids? And you're not going to know that until you really start the process and delve into a parenting time schedule, but really put thought into it. School, extracurriculars, employment, how is this going to work for everybody? It's not easy by any means.
No, that was one of the easiest parts of my divorce, right? We both wanted 50-50 custody. We both wanted joint custody because of our work schedules. We're both chiropractors. He has a practice in Oak Brook. I have a practice in Naperville. He had 2 late nights, which were Monday and Thursdays. So I think it was Monday and Thursdays. Oh my goodness, I can't even remember sometimes. But so I would always have the boys on Mondays and Thursdays. He would always have them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or whatever it's worked out. And I don't think I actually looked at my parenting document that was signed at my divorce one time the entire time, because we were so flexible. And it was, I always say to people, when you get married, you're not hoping to get divorced. But if you do get divorced and you have children, those children didn't do anything to cause that. And so to put their needs and to set aside whatever the hurts or the frustrations or the communication problems that you have as a couple, to literally put it on a shelf and focus on what is best for the child. Like you were mentioning, flexibility, or does your child do well with change? For some kids, my kids literally bounce back and forth And they just didn't have an issue with it. But had they, he and I would have looked at each other like, this is not working. We may just need to do 1 week on and 1 week off. That way they get settled and they're consistent for that week, even though for a child that doesn't like change, that's not the best. At least they're getting the same time and try to work it out. But I just see people going the wrong direction and taking their marriage anger and taking it out on the kids, and then putting the kids in a terrible place. And that's just not good for anyone.
Exactly. And you said, Cathy, that's the best place to be, where if you can take your, what we call an allocation judgment, and put that on the shelf and put it in a drawer in case you ever need to refer to it. But if you don't need to use that, that's the best situation to be in. So yep. You might be the envy of a lot of parents out there who are in divorced households, but honestly, if you're able to navigate that and just be real flexible and it's working for your family, that's the best result. Unfortunately, if you find yourself on the other side of that, that's where, I call it sometimes a roadmap. So if you hit a bump in the road, what does the schedule say? Like, so the court, even if you have great co-parenting, Cathy, like you and your former husband, where you're able to navigate it and work with what really is going to work best for your children, the court still wants to have this schedule set in place in a judgment, because it's going to be the default that's there for the parties in the family to fall back upon if there are these bumps in the road. Sure. And Cathy, you keep saying custody, and I have to correct you.
It's not custody. I know you told me this like 14 times.
In Illinois, we've decided to change the proverbial language. So we call it the allocation of significant parenting or decision-making. So it's a lot more wordy than it has to be, but it's significant decision-making that we allocate now between the parents. And it's great. So instead of joint custody, it's the joint allocation of significant decision-making.
Wow.
So, but the intent is the same. We want to really make sure the courts, they would want to make sure that the parents can make these decisions jointly together. And if you can't, that's a subject for another podcast.
Absolutely. We talk about divorce and we talk about the emotions behind it, right? It's very rare that you have two people that are like, yay, we're getting divorced. This is awesome, right? Sometimes there's one party that just can't wait to get divorced and another that's really left kind of a mess. But there's always emotions behind it. Again, especially if you do have children, or if there's a lot of complicated financial factors, or you don't have enough money to really sustain two households. When do you recommend to your clients to look for an outside therapist? I'm sure you have to act almost like in the moment as a therapist sometime, but that's not your main job. You're there to help them through the law process.
More often than not, it's an emotional process, like you said, whether you're ready for it, whether you're the spouse who's driving the bus, if you will, or you're just in that emotional space where this is now where you are and you're accepting it and you're moving forward. Even if you're that person, you might still find it beneficial to reach out to a therapist just to voice your concerns and talk it through. But you're right, the lines blur a little bit, but one of the main things going through the divorce process, it's cheaper, more affordable to use your health insurance to talk to a therapist than it might be to talk to me. So I find it useful, and it's at so many levels and points in the process. If you have a therapist that you're working with to help you deal with all the different emotions that are going through your own mind with your family, and to work it through there. But on the flip side of that, it's really important to keep the lines of communication open with your attorney. We'll tell you if it's not something germane to the divorce process, or something that, to go talk to might be something for next week's therapy meeting. But it's very important that you keep us up to date, even if you don't think it's very important, or I don't want to bother her with that. Bother me with it. I'll let you know, if it's something that we need to, take into consideration, or if it's something you can just not worry about. So don't overcall, don't call every single time. And when you do call, I suggest, just so it's efficient and economical, keep a list of questions, take the notes out on your phone and jot something down so that when we do talk, you don't forget. Because how many times are you on the phone and, oh, I can't remember what I was going to ask you. It happens a lot. So, and it's sometimes hard to, whether it's your schedule, my schedule, have a list of questions so you get all your points and all your questions to me at one time as much as you can. But it's just emphasizing keeping the lines of communication open during the process is really helpful.
For sure. For sure. I know a lot of people think about the house, right? Mm-hmm. And normally in a divorce situation, the house is one of the largest entities, if not, of course, the largest entity. Do you help people make that decision based off the finances? And I know so many people want to be able to provide consistency for their children or for themselves, even in the home that they, grew their family in. But for some people, doing so can put so much financial and emotional stress that at some point it's probably best for them to let go and sell the house. How do you navigate that?
Every situation is going to be different. And this is one of those key reasons for why you should consult with an attorney if you're contemplating a divorce. One of the things you might be thinking is, oh, I'm going to move out, or he or she needs to move out. It's not necessarily the case. And a lot of times, not all the time, but my advice is to stay in the house. So again, that's important why legal counsel at the very beginning of this process can be eye-opening and can really set the stage in the course of your divorce. These decisions, you don't want to be making that big of a decision to move out of the house, to sell the house, to keep the house without having consulted with a lawyer. And one of the big misnomers I feel is people sometimes have this mindset, I want to keep the house. I need to keep the house. Not necessary, but it depends upon your case. It depends upon your financial circumstances. It shouldn't be your knee-jerk reaction that you must keep the house as part of a divorce. So that's keeping the open mind, but also getting the right legal advice at the beginning of the process.
Sure. I know for us, it just wasn't possible. We just couldn't maintain two homes like that. And thankfully, it was something that I wasn't too emotionally tied into. And my boy stayed in a teeny tiny little apartment for about 2 years. It was super close to my practice. And I just remember thinking, we still have all the love, right?
Exactly.
We haven't lost that. I think there was a part of me that felt like it actually brought me and the boys closer. In general, I think my divorce, when couples are not working well together, so much of your energy is taken up trying to make sure that main relationship is okay. And so I found that when I was just able to spend time with my boys, personally, I felt like I became a better mom because I was just focused on them. I wasn't focused on the four of us or any issues that my ex and I might have been having. So I don't know. For me, it was kind of a relief, and it was a financial relief to not have to manage a big house, and a time relief, not having to try to even clean a big house. We downsized a bunch of the crap we had. We couldn't believe how much stuff we had. And it was almost just a reset and a restart of a new version of life, which is scary, but it was also can be awesome.
I agree. And so you bring up that's more towards the end or closer to the end of the divorce where you reset. So initially what I said earlier about staying in the house at the beginning of the process is something to discuss with your attorney, meaning at least at that point in time, it might be financially more effective for you as well, because if you're both living in the same house, you still only have the one household to maintain.
Yep.
You're exactly right. Maintaining two identical households, if you have a larger home or a smaller home, just may not be possible. And you might need to, as part of that resetting process, downsize and keep two smaller homes. We'd have to do the math, but even with two smaller homes, it's usually more expensive than the one common home you're starting with. So if you can save expenses and just have both of you and or the kids stay in the house throughout the divorce process, you're saving some money along the way too.
Absolutely. And it's super fun having a new roommate that you're trying to divorce. Super fun. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of the bases. Is there anything else you can think of as far as, all right, you're planning on getting divorced, you don't know what you don't know, any other resources or anything like that you want to share?
Take a deep breath, exercise, take care of yourself. And I truly believe once you make that first call and have a consultation, it will put your mind at ease. So relax a little bit and stay healthy, talk to friends, but talk to a lawyer too.
Well, and for me, my advice is to learn how to compartmentalize negative things going on in your life. I talk about this in Socket. I call it my Theraball technique, where everything that I have going on that's stressful, I think of it, and I think of it in like a colorful ball or a colorful bubble, right? And normally it's like all swimming all over. I've got finances, I'm getting divorced. What about my kids? What about work? Right? There's so many
You're
different
stressing
things.
me out, Cathy.
I know, right? So, but we can let ourselves just let all of that go all day long, right? And our head just spinning, 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 spinning. So I tried through my divorce, I tried to think about, okay, all these different things are in different balls, different bubbles. And then this sounds so silly, but I visualized that I was sitting on one of those exercise balls, which we call a Theraball, and all of those other bubbles were in the Theraball. Of course, I'm not literally sitting on a Theraball. This is all in my mind. But what that did for me is it took the problems that were up here and it put it in this one place. I wasn't denying I had the problems, and I was now sitting on the problems. And so, once a day, I'd say, okay, I've got to take a step forward in my divorce. So I'd take the bubble out, I'd crack it open, I'd look at it. What do I need to do? I'd process it. I'd have emotions about it. And then I'd be like, all right, I can't do anything more right now. And I'm going to go to the park with the kids. So I'm going to put that bubble back together. I'm going to put it back in the Theraball. And now I'm going to go enjoy myself and make sure that this tough phase of life, this tough season of life does not overshadow every morsel of happiness and joy that I continually can have even during this time.
Exactly. And, when it's keeping those bubbles, like you said, if you're working with an attorney, that's our job to help compartmentalize and take care of things so that you can go out and have those days with your kids at the park or whatever it is you guys are doing together. But if you have someone else helping you mind those bubbles, it's really helpful.
No, that's a great point. Claudia, how do people get a hold of you? Let's say they're like, yep, I need to give her a call. How do they get a hold of you?
So you can call us. You can call me. Our number is 312-621-9700, and that's the main number of the firm. Or you can feel free to reach out by email. My email is cgallo, CGALLO, at beermannlaw.com. That's BEERMANN law.com. And we would first have to, do what we call a conflict check. And then after that is completed, we would reach out to schedule a phone call or a Zoom, whatever you're comfortable with, to get the process started.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your advice, your thoughts. And for all of you, I certainly hope you're not about to be going through a divorce. But if you are, like Claudia said, take a deep breath. You can do it one step at a time, and don't let it overwhelm you. If you get the right resources, you have the right support behind you, you'll get to the other side. Again, one step at a time. All right. Well, have a wonderful day. And for everyone else, I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Cathy.